Did you know there's a 12th century saint who uncovered the secret to restoring not just physical sight, but also the spiritual vision that so many women have lost in these challenging times? And the most incredible thing is that her revelations align perfectly with what modern science is now confirming about the connection between our eyes, our emotions, and our faith. If you've recently felt your eyes getting tired faster, if words blur when you read, or if that feeling of eye strain reminds you that something profound is changing in your life, stay with me, because what you're about to hear could forever transform the way you care for your eyes and your soul. My name is Maria Elena, and I'm the narrator of this channel dedicated to the stories of our Most Holy Mother. Today, I want to share something extraordinary I discovered while researching the silent miracles that happen in the lives of women who place their complete trust in the intercession of the Virgin Mary. This is the story of Saint Hildegard of Bingen, but told from a perspective no one has ever explained to you before. A perspective that reveals how Our Lady was present in every one of her discoveries about healing the eyes of the body and the heart. Imagine for a moment the year 1141, in a Benedictine convent tucked away in the mountains of Germany. A 43-year-old woman named Hildegard experiences something that will change her life forever and, unknowingly, the lives of millions of women who would come after her. That September morning, as she prayed in her cell before dawn, something extraordinary happened. A soft, golden light began to fill the entire room, but it wasn't a light coming from outside. It seemed to emanate from within her own heart. Instinctively, Hildegard closed her eyes, but the light didn't disappear. On the contrary, it grew more intense, warmer, and more maternal. In that moment of mystical ecstasy, a sweet and loving voice began to speak directly to her heart. These weren't words she heard with her ears, but knowledge that was etched like sacred fire deep within her soul. And although history books never mention it directly, I am convinced that this maternal voice, this comforting presence that accompanied her in that revelation, was our Most Holy Mother preparing her to receive a wisdom that would benefit her daughters for centuries to come. The revelation Hildegard received that morning was stunning. She saw with supernatural clarity how every organ of the human body is connected to the state of the soul, how every physical illness has a spiritual root, and specifically, how the eyes are the windows through which not only the light of the world enters, but also the light of God, or the darkness of evil. But what excites me most about this vision is that Hildegard understood something revolutionary, that women have a special sensitivity in their eyes, a unique ability to see beyond the physical, to perceive the needs of the soul, both their own and those of others. During that mystical experience, which lasted several hours, Hildegard received specific knowledge about medicinal plants she had never studied, about natural remedies she had never seen prepared, about prayers she had never heard, but which flowed from her heart as if she had known them all her life. And in each of these revelations, she felt that maternal presence that calmed her when the visions became too intense, that gave her courage when she felt unworthy of receiving so many graces, that reassured the ear of her heart that everything she was learning was for the good of her sisters in faith. When she finally opened her eyes, it was already night. She had spent the entire day in ecstasy, and her sisters in the community had found her motionless, but with her face radiant, as if she had been conversing face-to-face with angels. The first thing Hildegard did upon regaining consciousness was to go to the altar of the Virgin Mary in her cell, a small wooden image she had inherited from her mother. She prostrated herself before her, and with tears of gratitude, whispered a prayer that spontaneously flowed from her heart. "My mother, I know it was you who prepared me to receive this grace. Help me to use this wisdom only to glorify your Son and to heal the wounds of my sisters." That night, Hildegard couldn't sleep. She felt as if her eyes had been completely renewed. She saw with a clarity she had never experienced before, but not just physically, spiritually as well. When she looked at things, she perceived their deepest essence, their divine purpose, their capacity to heal or to harm. When she looked at her sisters in the community, she could see in their faces, and especially in their eyes, the state of their souls, their hidden worries, their most intimate needs, But the most surprising thing was that she could also see something that had previously been invisible to her: the constant and loving presence of the Virgin Mary walking among all the women in the convent, gently touching those who most needed comfort, whispering into the spiritual ear of those going through difficult times, smiling with maternal tenderness at those who strove to be better each day. Hildegard understood in that moment that Our Lady had always been there, watching over, interceding, consoling, but that the eyes of the soul needed to be purified to be able to see her. The following days were a time of intense spiritual activity for Hildegard. Each morning, upon waking, she felt as if she was receiving new pages from a celestial book, knowledge about eye care that went far beyond what any doctor of her time could imagine. She discovered that certain emotional states directly affect eye health, that certain prayers have the power to relax the eye muscles, that some medicinal plants are more effective when combined with attitudes of faith and hope. One morning, while preparing a chamomile infusion for a sister who suffered from irritated and watery eyes, Hildegard had another profound revelation. She saw spiritually how the Virgin Mary, during the years following the crucifixion of Jesus, had also suffered from eye strain and swollen eyes from so much weeping. She saw how Our Lady, in her maternal wisdom, had discovered natural ways to care for her eyes, not only to maintain her physical health, but to always be ready to comfort others with a look filled with compassion and hope. This vision completely changed Hildegard's perspective on eye care. She understood that it wasn't just about using medicinal plants, but about accompanying each remedy with the same attitude of maternal love that the Virgin Mary had. From that moment on, whenever she prepared a natural medicine for the eyes, she did so as if she were preparing a gift of love for her own daughters, as if every drop of that infusion carried a special blessing from the Mother of God. Word quickly spread throughout the region about the miracles happening at Hildegard's convent. Women of all ages arrived seeking help for their sight problems, but they also arrived with hearts heavy with sadness, with souls wounded by life's difficulties, with that dull gaze that reflected years of suffering and hopelessness. What impacted these visitors most wasn't just the remedies they received, but the way Hildegard looked at them when she spoke. Her eyes radiated a supernatural peace, a profound understanding, an unconditional love that could only come from someone who had learned to see through the merciful eyes of the Virgin Mary. One October afternoon, a young woman named Catalina, the wife of a city merchant, arrived at the convent. Her eyes were so swollen from crying that she could barely open them, and she recounted through sobs that she had gradually lost her sight after the death of her only young son. The doctors had told her there was nothing to be done, that her blindness was a consequence of the extreme grief she had experienced, but she couldn't accept staying this way because she had 2 other small children who needed her care. Hildegard received her in her cell, and the first thing she did was take Catalina's hands in hers. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Catalina felt as if a loving mother was spiritually embracing her, as if a feminine presence full of compassion was enveloping her in an invisible mantle of comfort. Although she couldn't see her physically, her heart perceived with perfect clarity that the Virgin Mary was there, interceding for her, preparing her soul to receive the healing she so desperately needed. Hildegard began to explain something she had received in her revelations, that often the eyes of the body lose their ability to see when the eyes of the soul are too focused on pain, when all our inner vision is solely focused on what we have lost instead of on what God still wants to give us. She told her that the Virgin Mary, after witnessing the crucifixion of her son, also went through moments when sadness clouded her physical sight, but that she had learned to surrender that pain to God in a way that transformed suffering into healing compassion. For the next few days, Catalina remained at the convent following a very special treatment that Hildegard had developed under divine inspiration. Every morning before dawn, the 2 women would go to the chapel where the image of Our Lady was. There, Catalina learned to do what Hildegard called the prayer of surrendering the eyes. It involved placing her hands over her closed eyelids and saying to the Virgin Mary, "My Mother, my eyes have seen too much pain and can no longer see hope. I surrender this blindness of the soul to you so that you may teach me to see as you see, with eyes of faith, with eyes of love, with eyes of hope." After this prayer, Hildegard applied warm compresses to Catalina's eyes prepared with a very special combination of herbs: rose petals that symbolized the maternal love of Mary, sage leaves that represented divine wisdom, and drops of holy water that had been consecrated specifically for eye healings. But the most important thing wasn't the plants themselves, but the continuous prayer that accompanied the entire process. While the compresses rested on Catalina's eyes, Hildegard prayed softly, asking the Virgin Mary to intercede so that those eyes would see again not only the shapes and colors of the physical world, but also the beauty, goodness, and blessings that God continued to pour out on her life. On the 5th day of treatment, something happened that neither of them expected. Catalina was in the chapel, as she was every morning, with the warm compresses on her eyes, when she suddenly began to perceive a very soft light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At first she thought it was her imagination, but the light became clearer, more defined, and more real. When she finally dared to open her eyes and remove the compresses, she could see perfectly. But what moved her most wasn't having regained her physical sight, but that when she looked toward the altar, she could clearly see the Virgin Mary smiling at her with an indescribable tenderness, extending her arms like a mother receiving her daughter after a long absence. Catalina returned home completely transformed. Not only could she see physically, but her way of looking at life had completely changed. Where she once saw only reasons for sadness, she now discovered reasons for gratitude. Where before her eyes filled with tears of despair, they now moistened with tears of joy as she gazed at the faces of her children, the beauty of nature, the small daily miracles she had stopped perceiving when her soul was submerged in pain. But Catalina's story is just one of many that began to happen at Hildegard's convent. One after another, women who arrived with vision problems returned home, not only with their eyes healed, but with their hearts renewed, with a new way of perceiving life, with a deeper connection to the maternal presence of the Virgin Mary in their daily lives. Hildegard understood that she was being an instrument of something much greater than herself. In her private moments of prayer, she felt clearly how the Virgin Mary was revealing deeper and deeper secrets about the connection between eye health and spiritual well-being. She discovered that certain psalms, recited contemplatively, have the power to relax the ocular muscles. She learned that certain body positions during prayer facilitate blood circulation to the eyes. She received inspirations on how to combine specific fasts with herbal remedies to enhance the healing effects. She carefully recorded all this knowledge in manuscripts that would later become the first treatises on holistic medicine in Western history. But what the history books don't tell is that every page of those manuscripts was written under the loving guidance of Our Lady. Every medicinal recipe was inspired by the maternal wisdom of the Mother of God. Every healing prayer flowed from the heart of a woman who had learned to be a channel of divine mercy. Years passed, and Hildegard's fame spread throughout Europe. Emperors and kings sought her advice. Scholars and doctors traveled from distant lands to learn from her. But what filled our saint's heart with the most joy was that simple women, mothers, helpless widows, young women with wounded hearts, continued to come to her convent seeking not only the healing of their physical eyes, but also the restoration of their ability to see life with hope. One spring morning in the year 1165, Hildegard awoke with a special restlessness in her heart. During her morning prayer, she felt clearly that the Virgin Mary wanted to communicate something very important to her, something that would benefit women of all times, not just her own. She retreated to her cell and spent the entire day in deep contemplation, fasting and praying, preparing her soul to receive what she sensed would be one of the most significant revelations of her life. At sunset, as she prostrated herself before the image of Our Lady, the same golden light from that first mystical experience again filled the room. But this time the revelation was different, more personal, more intimate. Hildegard felt as if the Virgin Mary sat down beside her, as if a loving mother was about to share the most precious secrets of her maternal heart with her daughter. In that extraordinary mystical experience, Our Lady revealed to Hildegard something that would forever change her understanding of eye care. She showed her that every woman carries within herself a special kind of inner sight, a unique ability to perceive the needs of the soul, both her own and those of her loved ones. This spiritual vision is a specific gift that God granted to the feminine heart, but which is often clouded or lost when women forget their true identity as beloved daughters of the Most High. The Virgin Mary explained that just as she was able to see the pain in her son's heart before he expressed it with words, just as she was able to perceive the needs of the apostles before they themselves recognized them, so all women have this ability to see with the heart when they keep their spiritual eyes clean and focused on God. But she also revealed to her that this inner vision is affected by the same things that harm physical sight: excessive worries that cloud the mind, tears of bitterness that irritate both the soul and the eyes, a lack of spiritual rest that fatigues both the body and the spirit, and especially the loss of trust in divine providence that causes women to try to see or control everything themselves instead of resting in God's loving wisdom. During this revelation, Hildegard also received very specific instructions on how to help women regain both their physical sight and their spiritual vision. The Virgin Mary taught her a series of special prayers, which would later become known as the Litanies of the Healing Eyes, where each invocation is designed to heal a specific aspect of vision, both physical and spiritual. She also showed her how to prepare what she called the water of renewed vision, holy water to which 3 drops of dew collected at dawn are added, symbolizing the fresh grace of each new day, petals of wild violets, representing the humility needed to see the truth, and a few drops of consecrated olive oil, symbolizing the anointing of the Holy Spirit on the eyes of the soul. But the most precious part of this revelation is when Our Lady taught her what she called the gaze of Mary, a special form of contemplation where women learn to look at all situations in their lives as the Virgin Mary would, with eyes of compassion instead of judgment, with eyes of hope instead of despair, with eyes of love instead of criticism. When the vision ended, Hildegard felt that her own eyes had been transformed once again. Not only did she see with greater physical clarity, but when she looked at people, she could perceive exactly what they needed to heal in both body and soul. It was as if she had received a portion of the Virgin Mary's own maternal gaze. That ability to see the hidden wounds of the heart and know exactly how to touch them with the balm of divine love. The following days were a time of intense activity for Hildegard. She felt an urgency to transmit everything she had learned before it was too late. Although she was already over 60, an advanced age for her time, she worked tirelessly writing, teaching, and preparing her younger sisters to continue this mission of holistic healing. It was during this time that she developed what she considered her most effective method for the complete restoration of sight: the 9 days of ocular renewal. This spiritual retreat combined moderate fasting, specific prayers, the application of herbal remedies, and above all, contemplative exercises where women learned to close their physical eyes to open the eyes of the soul. Each day of the retreat was dedicated to healing a specific aspect of vision. The first day focused on cleansing the eyes of tears of bitterness and resentment. The second day on strengthening eyes tired by excessive worries. The third day on curing the spiritual nearsightedness that makes us see only the problems close by without perceiving the distant blessings. And so on, until on the 9th day, the participants experienced what Hildegard called renewed vision, the ability to see life with eyes filled with gratitude, hope, and love. But perhaps the most beautiful thing about this method is that each exercise is accompanied by an inner apparition of the Virgin Mary. The women who participated in these retreats testified again and again that during the most profound moments of prayer, they could feel the maternal presence of Our Lady accompanying them, comforting them when the healing process became painful, encouraging them when they felt they wouldn't be able to change vision patterns that had been ingrained in their hearts for years. One of the most memorable participants in these retreats was a woman named Isabel, who arrived at the convent completely blind due to a disease that doctors couldn't identify. But what impacted Hildegard most wasn't her physical blindness, but her spiritual blindness. Isabel had completely lost the ability to see goodness in people, beauty in creation, or hope in the future. Her heart was so hardened by years of suffering that she could no longer perceive the love of God in any manifestation. During the 9-day retreat, Isabel experienced a gradual but profound transformation. day after day as she participated in the prayers and applied the herbal remedies to her eyes, she began to perceive subtle changes, not only in her physical sight, but in her way of perceiving reality. On the 5th day, she could distinguish shapes and lights. On the 7th day, she could see faces and colors. But it was on the 9th day that the most extraordinary miracle happened. Not only did she completely regain her physical sight, but when she looked at the world with her renewed eyes, she could see the loving presence of God in every detail of creation. The final years of Saint Hildegard's life were marked by an extraordinary spiritual intensity. At 75, an advanced age for most people of her time, she experienced a complete renewal of all her faculties, especially her sight. Her eyes shone with a supernatural clarity that impacted everyone who knew her, as if she had found the fountain of eternal spiritual youth. In these final years, Hildegard received what she considered her most important revelation about eye care, the understanding that sight is not just a physical sense, but the main channel through which the soul connects with the divine. The Virgin Mary revealed to her that when women learn to care for their eyes as she had taught her, they are not only preserving their physical health, but are preparing their souls to contemplate the glory of God in this life and in eternity. It was during this period that Hildegard developed what would be her most lasting legacy for women of all time, the Marian method of visual restoration. This revolutionary method combines specific natural remedies with deep spiritual exercises, but all under the maternal protection and guidance of the Virgin Mary. The method begins each day with what Hildegard called the morning greeting to the eyes. Upon waking, before fully opening the eyelids, the woman gently places the palms of her hands over her closed eyes and whispers, "Mother Mary, just as you were the first to contemplate the face of the newborn Jesus, help my eyes to see today with the purity and love of your maternal gaze." Then comes the sacred cleansing. Using warm water infused with white rose petals and a drop of holy water, the eyes are delicately washed while an Ave Maria is prayed for each eyelid, asking the Virgin Mary to purify not only the physical sight, but also the vision of the soul. The third step is the nourishment of sight, a special breakfast composed of foods that Hildegard had identified as particularly beneficial for the eyes. Pure honey, which represents the sweetness of a loving gaze, walnuts, which symbolize the wisdom needed to see the truth, and an infusion of specific herbs prepared while meditating on the joyful mysteries of the Rosary. But perhaps the most powerful part of the method is what Hildegard called the moments of voluntary blindness. 3 times a day, the woman consciously closes her eyes for 10 minutes and dedicates herself solely to seeing with the eyes of the heart. During these moments, she practices visualizing the presence of the Virgin Mary at her side, feels her maternal love, listens to her silent advice, and allows that spiritual connection to nourish and strengthen both her soul and her physical eyes. The effectiveness of this method was so extraordinary that it soon spread far beyond the convent walls. Women all over Europe began to practice it and experienced not only significant improvements in their physical sight, but also a profound transformation in their way of perceiving life, relationships, and their purpose in the world. One of the last women to arrive at Hildegard's convent was a young woman named Esperanza, who came from far away with a seemingly impossible case. She was born completely blind, but had an unwavering faith that the Virgin Mary could work the miracle of giving her sight. What moved Hildegard most was that Esperanza wasn't just asking for physical sight, but was pleading that, if God didn't deem it appropriate to grant her that grace, at least she would be granted a spiritual vision so clear that she could be useful in helping other women who were suffering. Hildegard agreed to accompany Esperanza on a special 40-day retreat, the most intense she had ever designed. During this time, they both fasted, prayed, and practiced the Marian method with absolute dedication. Each day, Esperanza experienced increasingly intense spiritual visions, where the Virgin Mary taught her profound secrets about how to see without physical eyes, how to perceive the spiritual reality behind all material appearances. At the end of the 40 days, something happened that neither of them had anticipated. Esperanza did not regain her physical sight, but she developed a capacity for spiritual visions so extraordinary that she could see the state of people's souls just by hearing their voice. She could perceive the presence of the Virgin Mary in a constant and tangible way, and she could guide other women in their process of inner healing with a wisdom that seemed to come directly from heaven. Hildegard understood that she had been a witness to a miracle even greater than the restoration of physical sight. She had seen how the Virgin Mary can compensate for any physical limitation with extraordinary spiritual gifts when she finds a heart completely surrendered to the divine will. In her final months of life, Hildegard dedicated all her energy to training Esperanza and other young women to continue this mission of holistic healing. She knew that her time on earth was coming to an end, but she also knew that the legacy she had received from the Virgin Mary must endure to benefit women of all future generations. On September 17, 1179, while in prayer before the image of Our Lady, Hildegard felt her soul preparing for the definitive encounter with her Creator. Her last words, spoken in a voice her sisters described as filled with supernatural peace, were, "My mother, thank you for teaching me to see with your eyes. Now my earthly eyes close, but I know they open to contemplate you eternally." Dear sister listening to me, the story of St. Hildegard did not end with her death. Her legacy lives on, her methods still work, and above all, the loving intercession of the Virgin Mary is still available to every woman who, like you, seeks to restore not only the sight of her physical eyes, but also the clear vision of her soul. In these modern times, when our eyes are more fatigued than ever by screens, when our spiritual vision is clouded by constant worries, when we lose the ability to see the beauty and blessings that God places in our path every day, the knowledge that the Virgin Mary shared with St. Hildegard is more relevant than ever. If something in this story has touched your heart, if you feel that your eyes need that profound restoration that can only come from heaven, I invite you to join our spiritual family by subscribing to this channel. Here, we will continue to explore together the treasures of wisdom that our saints received through the intercession of our Most Holy Mother, always with the certainty that she continues to walk alongside each one of us. Share in the comments. Have you ever experienced that feeling that your eyes see, but your soul fails to perceive hope? Have you felt the maternal presence of the Virgin Mary comforting you in moments of sadness or despair? I would love to hear your testimony because I am sure that your experience can illuminate the path of another sister who is going through similar situations. And if you live in Brazil, share your state or city in the comments. Let's remember that we are a big extended family under the mantle of Our Lady of Fatima, and that in every corner of our homeland there are women who need to hear these words of hope and healing. I also ask you, as an act of faith and love towards other women who need this message, to share this video with 10 people you know. It may be that one of them is living in the exact moment when she most needs to hear about the maternal love of the Virgin Mary and about the real possibility of restoring both her physical sight and her spiritual vision. Recognize these signs in yourself and in the women around you. Eyes that get tired more than normal, vision that blurs when there are worries, tears that come for no apparent reason, difficulty seeing beauty where you once found it easily, a feeling that life has lost its color and brightness. All of these are silent calls from your soul asking for that profound restoration that only the grace of God, through the intercession of His Most Holy Mother, can grant. Let's end together with this prayer that St. Hildegard prayed every day. Virgin Mary, Mother of Eternal Light, take my tired eyes into your maternal hands. Cleanse with your love all the opaqueness that prevents me from seeing the beauty of your Son's creation. Restore in me that clear vision of the soul that allows me to recognize your blessings every day, your miracles in every encounter, your loving presence in every moment of my life. May my eyes reflect the peace that only you can give. May my gaze transmit the love that you teach me. May my vision always be focused on the eternal without neglecting the temporal. Amen. May Our Lady of Fatima, our Blessed Mother, cover you with her protective mantle. May St. Hildegard intercede for you from heaven, and may you always walk with the courage and serenity of one who knows she is a beloved daughter of the King of the universe and has the Queen of Heaven as her mother. Until our next encounter, dear sister, may God bless you abundantly and may your eyes always see with the clarity of divine love.